Today's guest is Jake Cobba Stevens. An avid runner, Jake's experience in marketing and content creation has seen him experience firsthand some of the world's biggest sporting events. Jake has been a part of the Australian F1 Grand Prix content team. In 2022, he headed over to Birmingham with the Australian Commonwealth Games team, and he's worked at the Australian Open, amongst many, many other fantastic world sporting events. Today, expect to learn about how Jake got started in the world of sports marketing. Learn about the trends that he sees currently within the social media landscape and where things will change in the years to come. You'll also get to learn how to start to build out your own content strategy, whether this be for a sporting organisation or team, or for a business of any different size. And you'll also learn the answer to the all-important question: where did Jake get his nickname Cobba from? Let's welcome Jake to the pod. Well, Jake, good morning. How's things?
Good, mate. Going well. Coming into September, so weather's warm and AFL Grand Final's not too far away.
It's not too far away. And who do you support?
I'm a Swans man, so we're looking
Swans
good.
man.
I've probably dated this already. In the first, I'll probably get knocked out immediately as soon as this comes out. But exciting time.
Yeah, I'm a Cats fan, so wouldn't be surprised if we see a Cats Swans Grand Final again. Hopefully, for your sake, it's a little bit of a different turn of events compared to 2 years ago.
Yeah, but no, they're a good team, the Cats.
Let's just hope we don't fall into the trap of round 8 again and play that form in the next 2 games.
Yes. It's exciting times, yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to our chat today. You've got an extensive experience in sports marketing, and you've been to a number of events, and you're working with Wildcard now, who are doing some amazing things as well. So we'll talk about all fronts there. But my first question for you is, what drew you to sports marketing in the first place, as opposed to regular corporate marketing?
Yeah, it's a little bit of an accident for me. I started at university. I studied journalism, and sport journalism was kind of the direction that I chose because I liked reading the news, and I read the paper every day when I was, at school, which is probably a little bit different to, I guess, sort of most 13, 14, 15-year-old kids, but I love the news and I love the paper and I love watching the news. So I decided I wanted to sort of explore journalism and see where that is. I didn't really have a full idea of what that would look like, but I thought that it might be a good basis, a good grounding of an education. And from there, I kind of learnt a little bit more about the digital media scene and this thing called social media, which started to become a thing around that time. And for me, it was a little bit of a right place at the right time and saw the growth of social and how important that can be to businesses and sport. And I thought, there could be an opportunity here. So it wasn't purposeful, but I sort of led into that content creation area early on and sort of went from opportunity to opportunity, went from there. And then you blink and then it's 10 years' time. So.
And back in those days, talking about, sounds like ages ago, but it was fairly recently, 10 years ago, that was still relatively photo-based social media, not too much of the video as we see now, right? Yeah,
I remember, like, my first job was my first job in the industry was social media for the Australian Open. I was very lucky that someone took a chance to have me in that role, and we didn't really know what it was doing. I certainly didn't know what I was doing, but in those days, like, Instagram didn't host videos. It was all like a photo platform, and I remember standing like in the race of the players as they come out before the court, and I would literally like snap a photo on my phone and, chuck a filter on it and like upload it, and that was like social, and you're like, oh, we're doing it, I guess. So yeah, it's obviously grown immensely since then, and it's really exponential. Like every 6 months, the landscape changes, and it is sometimes hard to keep a track of it all. But certainly a bit of a changed industry since those days.
Yeah, that first Australian Open, what was some of the big names that you were side by side with in the race there?
Yeah, I remember certainly like the first time I saw Rafa Nadal coming down, it's like, sort of pinch me sort of moment as you're a, green fresh-faced,
Fresh-faced.
fresh-faced and green operator in the field, and sort of seeing the likes of those sort of mega sporting stars, right here in Melbourne. It's like that was pretty cool, and I kind of thought, yep, this is sort of what I want to be doing.
Yeah. And you've always had a bit of a sport background yourself, right? Running and what forth?
Yeah, I've always certainly loved sport. And it was interesting when I got to uni and did a sport degree. I thought I knew a lot about sport, but, you'd walk into a lecture and someone would be like, oh, did you see the Maple Leafs game? And I'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about here. I don't even know what sport that is. But, I've always sort of loved that industry, and that's sort of where I've found myself over the years, yeah.
Australian Open, it's fresh out of uni. You got Rafael Nadal coming down the race at Rod Laver Arena. Other events you've been involved in, you got the likes of the Melbourne Grand Prix, the F1, Nitro Athletics, and Usain Bolt here at Lakeside in, I believe it was 2017, and then of course the Birmingham Com Games 2022 with the Australian team there. So these are big events that you've been involved in. There's some amazing experiences. How proud of yourself are you that you've been able to get yourself into a position where you can be rubbing shoulders with some of the best athletes in the world and experiencing all these amazing events and accomplishments right next to them as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's certainly not something that you really think about at all until you maybe look at your LinkedIn profile and then you think, oh, okay, maybe I've done a little bit actually. So certainly events have been a passion of mine, and working in sporting events and doing social media and owned social around those events has been a privilege for sure, 100%. But you've also got to remember that it's never really about you. You're there you're there to do a job, and you're on behalf of someone, and that job is 100% pretty cool. And you think back to 13-year-old version of yourself, and you think, I think that they would be pretty happy with how it all ended up. But it's like any other job. You go in there, you execute it to your best of your ability, and events are really hard for sure. I think that probably also shouldn't be lost. They are, glamorous, but it's a lot of hard work and a lot of late nights and long hours attached to that, and it is very difficult. And it's sort of under those conditions, it can be easy to lose sight of your concentration and potentially slip up. We all slip up at certain times, but it's a high stress environment, so certainly not for everyone. But there is a big reward attached to it as well, and being a part of an event, whether it's a world class sporting event or a big campaign, certainly rewarding.
So that Birmingham Games, that's an incredible achievement. And I would imagine probably one of the ones that you're most proud of being at.
Yeah, again, you're just lucky to be along there for the ride and to be a part of it. It was certainly fun going overseas and being with the team and working with the team. A lot of talented individuals on the staff side. So, to learn off, their expertise and to see how they go about it was, certainly very lucky to have the opportunity to do that.
And how did that opportunity arise originally?
Yeah, I have a background in athletics. So one of my first jobs full-time was at a media agency called Jump Media, who is owned by David and Sam Colbert, who are quite heavily in the athletics world, having sort of participated in the sport myself at a much lower level than those guys. But having participated in the sport, I sort of understand the sport and the people and the culture of the sport. So I took the knowledge and the background of that and my skill set, or building my skill set in the marketing world and content creation in social and writing in that field, and I applied that to a sport which was a little bit more off Broadway, a little bit more niche. So I was lucky to have Athletics Australia as one of my early clients back in the day when I was very green and still learning how to do things, but had some fantastic mentors in David and Sam and a lot of other people as well, help guide you in a direction and learn so much from. So that's where my background in that particular sport came about, and then the opportunity at the Commonwealth Games came about a few years later, and sort of right place, right time, and I was lucky enough to head over there.
Yeah, that's a great tip as well. Mixing and matching the skills that you do have. You've got the marketing, you've got the content creation side of things, and you've got on the other side of it, you've got athletics and your knowledge of the sport there. Bringing those two together to create yourself a bigger opportunity within the field of marketing and content creation. It's a great way to go about it.
Yeah, certainly, and that's always my advice to graduates who come and say that they want to work in sport, and I say, where do you want to work, and they'll list a big sport, whether it's soccer or AFL or cricket, and these big sports where there is a lot of opportunity, yes, but it is a lot harder to sort of crack into the market at that level because there is so much competitiveness. So I always say, look off Broadway and look to a smaller sport, whether it's a lower league potentially, or a sport that doesn't have typically doesn't have the budget or the resources to have a whether it's a full-time social media person or a marketer or a content creator or a feature writer or whatever content you're producing. Your off-Broadway sports, things like badminton or table tennis, or maybe it's skateboarding Australia, or maybe it's rock climbing, and these smaller sort of sports, and learn as much as you can about that and the community and what they value and what they want, and then apply your marketing skills to that smaller end is a good way to learn and set you up for success, and you get to do a little bit of everything, and then you start to build a portfolio and you go from there. But it's certainly a lot easier enter into the market, and maybe I was just a bit lucky with athletics as well.
Always going to be at the right spot, the right time, definitely. But that's so important. If you can build up a portfolio, build up some credibility, and show some real world results of what you've been able to achieve for a client, whether that be a small little league or maybe bigger brands like the likes of your Skateboarding Australia. They're an Olympic sport now, so they've got a bit more of a name behind them now than they did probably 10, 15 years ago. If you can build results with these agencies, organisations, and then you can approach a bigger name client down the line and say, this is what I have achieved with limited resources potentially. And you say, well, if you invest a little bit heavily here, based on what I've been able to do, there could be a big upside for that bigger name client down the line.
Yeah, it's a strategic approach, but I think it's also important not to get caught up on who you're working for, who the client is. Like, no matter how big they are, it's not about who it is. It's about the output that you're doing. So it's having pride in the work and delivering as best you can. Obviously with the budget and resources and everything, but as best you can. To write a cracking story about whatever sport or whatever league or whatever local community story that you're working on, and trying to make that as best as possible, rather than I'm only doing this because I want to get here. No, you've got to have pride in your work, and you've got to do everything to the best of your ability from ground zero. Doesn't matter where you end up, but that's focus on the output, not the destination.
Yeah, it's a good way to say about it. Yeah, definitely. So let's have a look at your work with Wildcard now. So these guys, they're a sports marketing agency out of the TGI sports group for people that are unaware of who they are. What made you get involved with Wildcard initially?
Yeah, super lucky to be at such a strong creative agency, and have the backing of of the company. It's full of creative people and people who are really good at their job. So to be around such a strong group of people and motivated people who are creative is certainly inspiring. To like to walk into the office every day like that. Our mantra at Wildcard is to challenge convention and to be brave. So that's something that we try to apply to the work that we can, because we know that challenging convention is a way to stand out from the crowd, and to not accept things that how they've always been done before. It's not always possible, but you always got to try and flip the script where you can. So being in that environment that encourages creativity and encourages you to be brave and to have no bad ideas, and to be in that environment where you challenge each other, I'm super lucky to be involved, and it's a fantastic place to work.
That's such a good mantra. challenge convention and be brave. And for a creative space, which is what you're in, that can't be a much better of a mantra to walk into an office every day and challenge convention and be brave, because that's what creativity is all about. If you restrict that, you limit that freedom, then what's the purpose of being creative at the end of the day?
Yeah, you've always got to keep it in the back of your mind, and we're all guilty of sort of falling into the trap of doing things the way that they've always been done, and that's fine. But the more that you repeat that work, the less powerful it's going to be, and and the more stale it's going to become. And we're all working in an industry where there's never been more content, and there's never been more creators, and there's never been more people fighting for your attention. So, the way to flip that script is to challenge that convention, is to think outside the box where you can, and try things, because you don't know if you don't try.
Yeah, that's a very good point, most definitely. And what are some of the projects that you've been involved in that you're most proud of with Wildcard?
Yeah, one of my current clients at the moment, the Cadell Evans Great Ocean Road Race, which is a cycling event, a one-day cycling event that happens down in Geelong in the Surf Coast region. So that's something that is a one-day event, or it happens across a weekend, but is a lot of months in the planning and the lead up and the build up to that event. So that's something that I work fairly closely with, looking after the owned assets, social media, website, email, that sort of thing. And that when that event rolls around in late Jan, early Feb, it's fantastic. It's fantastic for the region. It's a real celebration of cycling, and you see the cycling community come out and support it. To watch the professionals, elite riders from Europe and across the world come down to our own backyard and to race. Some fast and furious racing is certainly pretty cool, and then there's a mass participation people's ride element to it, which is also, so fantastic to see so many people challenging themselves across the same course as which the pros ride. It's not an easy ride, that's for sure, but it's a real celebration of the community, and to have the backing of the event and Cadell Evans himself be a part of that whole weekend. It's a pretty cool event. That's something that I work on, and I love that.
Yeah, and you just touched on the effect that these events have on communities and the locals around the areas that they're run in. Is that a big part of why you do what you do as well, to have that impact on the communities that are involved with the sport or an event or however it may be?
Yeah, sport is such an emotional industry. It means so much to so many people, whether it's your sport or whether you're taking part of it from a mass participation event. It is an emotional world we work in, so seeing those emotions come to life is, it's pretty powerful if you're there. If you see people cry on the finish line, and I don't know if you've ever been to the end of the marathon, but it's a pretty inspiring place to be. So events such as those that bring out the passions of people and the passions of fans, that really act in an emotional way, that it isn't a logical thing to go to a big stadium and scream your lungs out and cry at the result. It's an emotional thing. So to be a part of that and to harness that as best you can on behalf of the rights holder or the brand is what makes this industry so special.
When it comes to sport, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing on social media at the moment? As you touched on at the start of the episode, every 6 months something seems to change and it's hard to keep up to date. So in relation to sport, sporting events, clubs, etc., what are you seeing in sports marketing that are challenges on social media and digital at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's probably a bit of a misconception that everything has to be perfect on social, and that's certainly not what we're seeing at the moment in terms of the way that the landscape is trending. You've obviously got to be authentic, and whatever that means, if that's authentic to the brand or authentic to the audience. But I think that there's, certainly one of the challenges is producing content that obviously stands out to the crowd, because it's never been more crowded than it is at the moment, and we've never had so many content options. So it's about creating something that is authentic, that connects to the audience, and is is engaging and attractive, and that's where people want to spend their time viewing your content, because we have so many options nowadays, so it's not so easy.
Yeah.
But certainly I think that's the direction that everything's going in.
So it's funny that you say, it's not funny, but it's interesting that you say authentic, because this is a word that's thrown around pretty much everywhere in marketing, and especially when it comes to video. People often have to portray themselves, or they feel like they have to portray themselves in a different manner because they're on camera and they've got lights, they've got everything, they're going out there to the world, and they want to put on a different perspective sometimes. So how do you see authenticity being brought up in sports? How does that relate to sport, do you think? Is it just in terms of putting yourself out there as a brand is what it is? This is your sport, or how do you see that differentiating?
It's interesting because I'm under spotlight and microphone at the moment, so I hope I'm being authentic. I'm not probably sure I am, but no, I think you've got to go back to basics, and it's like understanding your audience and understanding what your audience wants from you. Sometimes they don't know what they want, but more often than not, there's probably a research piece in saying, whether it's access to athletes or it's analysis of this sort of type, or if it's not that and it's just fun memes or whatever it is, the understanding of your audience has never been more important. So, and I think that's a growing field as well. So it's numbers based, but it's qualitative as well.
Yeah.
Understanding what they want and being able to deliver your messages in the format that they are expecting. That's the challenge, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Deliver the message in the format that they're expecting it. Yeah, that's very, very, very important to remember. And I suppose, what are some of the platforms then that you say would offer the best opportunity for clubs then?
Well, in terms of social, at the moment it's fairly obvious that TikTok's sort of where a lot of, I was going to say a lot of kids, it's not that anymore. A lot of people, a lot of Australians spend their time more on TikTok, almost double than the next channel, which is on YouTube. And that's really interesting because obviously YouTube has the longer form video and TikTok's the shorter, but people are still spending twice as much time on TikTok than YouTube. We've seen Instagram and certainly Facebook hit a maturity and a bit of a levelling off, a plateau if you like. Instagram's still, I guess, sort of the channel of choice for your athletes, and obviously still important, as is Facebook. Facebook reach is always still important. Facebook's groups, but we're sort of seeing that individualisation of each of the channel. They're great to use for certain parts, and that's why a social media strategy is important to tailor for each of those channels, because they're becoming more and more different. And the way that people use them and the way that brands use them needs to be more and more different as well to suit the channel and find the audience segment that is on each of those channels.
Yeah.
So that sounds pretty general, but certainly I think for who knows where we're going to go in 6 months' time or 5 years' time or 10 years' time, whether these platforms are going to exist. But it's just trying to stay as up to date as possible in terms of what these tech giants are doing and how others are using their tools to communicate to their audience in that platform appropriate way.
As much as it is general advice, it's so important and it needs to be reinforced, because businesses, they simply don't be native to each platform. They have one piece and they say, well, put it on Instagram, put it on TikTok, YouTube, etc., put it everywhere, but it hasn't been adapted to the platform's best practices. And that's where they're missing out on that extra 5 or 10% reach or whatever the outcome they're looking for. That's the missed opportunity there, correct? When it's not native to the platform, it's not sitting with the culture of the platform. It's just been copied and pasted across everywhere.
Yeah, it is difficult. And I certainly said it from the sport or the brand or the rights holder's point of view, where it's like back in the day, you obviously had your PR and communications, and maybe you had a website, or even pre that, it was a lot simpler. But now that there's so many more channels, and there feels like an obligation to fill all of those channels, which is difficult because marketing budgets obviously need to go in line with that. It's not applicable to say, oh, you need every channel, you need to be across every channel and doing all this content, where simply maybe that's just not effective. So it is as you say, like the different channels need their own strategy, just in the way that you would have a different strategy for your website, or a different strategy for your PR and comms, and your different strategy for your above the line billboard advertising, or whatever it is, your radio. Like, we're getting to the point now where social channels are segmented, are getting further and further away from each other. That they they're almost their own entity in a way, which is interesting. And it'll probably continue to go that way for a little while still, while we work out where it is. So it's interesting. It's certainly interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And from there, where do you see things moving? It's hard to predict what's going to come in the next 6 months. I'm not sure if you've read it. Have you read Gary Vee's latest book? No. So in his latest book, Day Trading Attention, he speaks about how LinkedIn is probably a big opportunity for a lot of businesses. If it relates to sport, maybe to a lesser degree, I would say. What are your thoughts on that?
It depends. I think again, it's you got to understand your audience. So you've got to look at who your audience is, where they're spending time, and what they want from you. So if that, again, you have a lot of different audiences, and like even as a sport, yes, you've got a fan, but you have different types of fan, and where those different types of fan are going to want to consume different types of content, and then again, it just multiplies across each of the channels, each of the content. You times that by each of the variables, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of different strategies and a lot of different things that you've got to target, and then you've got to prioritise where your resources go, because we know that resources and budget are infinite. So I guess it's without being specific, I think you've again got to understand what your goal is, what your message is, who your audience is, and then match that all up, and that's how you get your strategy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So let's say a new event, a new sporting brand comes to you at Wildcard. What would you say is the first step that you would work with them through to start building out their strategy to achieve their desired outcome?
Yeah, well, you've got to find out what their desired outcome is. I think that's so important, because that almost gets forgotten. You can't put the cart before the horse. So you have to work out their priorities, and it's starting from there. The 4 key questions. It's not rocket science at all. It's marketing. It's certainly not rocket science.
Yeah.
You've got your why, your who, your where, and your how. Your why is your priorities and your goals and your targets. Your who is your audience. Talking about understanding your audience. Your channels are your where. So it's where you're speaking to them, and then your content is how, and then that's how you're speaking to them. So that's I guess a fairly simple flow of how you would go about creating a digital or a social strategy, and sort of working through all those to lead you back, or to ladder up to the priorities. That should always be the goal. But there's lots of different ways that you can, again, all those variables, there's lots of different ways you can do it. Owned social is an empty paddock, and you can build whatever you want in that paddock, and you don't have to follow convention either. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Spoken about taking the unconventional route in. Just because this sport or this brand does it this way, doesn't mean that you have to. You can draw inspiration for it, for sure, and you can look at what others are doing, but there's no rules in terms of what you create in content and social and this space. So don't have to be defined by that, but you also have to be focused on what your priorities are, because that's how you get there.
Yeah. What are the common misconceptions that you see out there for a lot of businesses and brands as it relates to sport?
Yeah, I think, look, I don't know if it's much of a misconception, but I do think that not everything has to be perfect. I spoke about that before. Not everything has to be a clean piece, or not everything has to be the perfect post. Things can ladder up, and you look at the whole rather than the individual. So it's a whole campaign, and the different messages and different content that goes into that campaign rather than a single piece. So not everything has to be perfect. But I think it's also worth remembering that no one, you get caught up in your head, no one really actually cares too much about the content that you're producing as much as you do. So,
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
maybe it's a little bit different in sports because people do care a lot about sports, and you only have to look at the comments section sometimes after a bit of an out there post to see what people think. But they're social and owned assets and owned content there's a lot more freedom than you probably think. So again, as long as it ladders up to your priorities and goals as a whole, then you're sort of on the right track.
Love it, Jake. Fantastic, mate. As we finish up, so we've got 2 questions for you. They relate to career-based, but you can also talk to them, I suppose, in a life sense as well, personal sense. So the first question is, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned over your career as a marketer? And then the second question, what one tip would you give someone who is completely fresh to marketing, in your shoes as they're coming out of university perhaps, to help them improve by 1% today?
The double barrel question. Cool. Lesson, bring an extra battery pack, I think. Don't run out of charge. I think that's a pretty good lesson. I don't know if you accept that as an answer, but I think that there's probably something to be said in preparation.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're going to need until you need it. So, whether that's research before an event or getting as much preparation in before it happens, because you never know when you're going to need it, or you never know when you're going to use this template or spit this fact or this this stat, and you learn from the best. Your Bruce McAvaney type, who is just 90% preparation and 10% execution. So I think that there's probably something to be learned there as well. For the tip, I'd probably say download TikTok if you don't have it. I think that's a good place to start, because I think that it's important to have and I've always been big on having a wide media diet and listening and watching and consuming content that you wouldn't normally consume, because I think that there's inspiration, but I think it's worth seeing what is out there, and I do that all the time. Like, I try to listen to a different radio station every day just to sort of see how people go about it, or listen to podcasts you usually wouldn't, read books that you usually wouldn't, or watch YouTube videos to see how other people in other industries do things, because I think that there's something that can be learnt from everyone. And then if you become too siloed in your media diet, or if you only watch and listen to the same things, it's hard to be inspired or get new ideas from being narrow focused. So certainly wide media diet can help that.
That's a good tip, because there's that danger always, if you keep too narrow focused, you do miss out on the opportunities that are just out of peripheral vision, as they say. So that's a very good tip there. Thanks, Jake. Yeah. And one other question for you. Where does the nickname Cobba arise from?
Oh, that's a own little branding project of myself, I think. My name's Jacob, and there's Cobb on the end of Jacob. So there was a few Jakes at school, so that's kind of what I rolled with. But then, legitimately, as I became into the media world a little bit, I thought, well, here's sort of somewhat of a recognisable brand. I don't know if it is, but certainly a name that I roll with, and most people call me Cobb or Cobba, and then they get confused when they get an email from Jake. So maybe it's not as smart as I had intended, but that's where that one comes from.
Jake, look, thanks for your time. It's been fantastic to chat and learn about your experiences with the Australian Open and going through to the F1 and over into Birmingham with the Australian Olympic team, Commonwealth Games team, and then of course your work with Wildcard now and all the events that you've been involved with them. So it's been fantastic to chat, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, Didier.